We've been with the Quackast since its puberty, apparently. So.
What was that?
That's right.
Since puberty, I said. Since
Oh,
the
yes.
puberty of the Quackast, we've been here. So.
Exactly.
Yes.
You came of
We
age
are those
with
unwanted hairs that grew in.
Yes.
The pubes of the Quackast. Oh, dude. Okay. Hello and welcome to the Quackast. This is Quackast number 397. I'm Ozone Ocean. This is Drunk Duck Quackast, of course. I'm Ozone Ocean, and with me is Pitface. Hello, Pitsy.
Hello.
Hi, Tanserine.
Hello.
And Baines. Hello, Bainserine face.
Hello.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about horror comics today. Are we?
Ooh.
Yay.
Horror comics.
And fear itself, I believe.
Yeah.
It's
Itself.
the only thing to fear. Have you guys ever heard the song by Skyhawk's horror movie?
No.
So good. I'll try and stick that in. No, I can't do that in the Quackast, can I? Because it'll be copyright infringement. Damn it. Now we're shared on iTunes. No, we were always shared on iTunes. We're shared on like Stitcher and something else. Various things. We're shared on all sorts of stuff.
Nice.
Tune in radio. That's it. Tune in radio. What's that, Tom?
Is there any preference for any platform?
No, you got to be shared on as many as possible. That's YouTube as well. Of course, we've been on YouTube for ages. Google Play, all that stuff. Everywhere you can find us. And of course, the new player as well, which makes it a lot easier to listen to us now. On
yeah, that was neat. Neat addition.
The new Quackast player with actual the image, everything. So that's cool. But I digress. Horror comics. That's what we'll be talking about. But before we get into that, I got to mention the featured comic this week. Which, let's see, the featured comic this week was Hacking Human. So, take it away, me, with Hacking Human. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Hacking Human. Hacking Human has such an intriguing title, doesn't it? Selena is a thief, a very clever and sexy one that works with computers and wears a skin-tight black catsuit. Her partner is a disembodied floating head named Heinrich. He just happens to be a ghost. Together, they make an unusual but effective and deadly team. The art is mostly black and white, drawn in an idiosyncratic and very individual style. The writing is straight-out action heist stories told in short chapters. Have a look and get sucked into the story. Yeah, this is a fun little comic. There aren't too many pages. It's told in a bunch of chapters, actually. So they are individual stories in their own right, and they're sort of joined together. And it's very interestingly told that way. You get little episodes of Selena and Heinrich's escapades, so to speak. And yeah, the art has a very idiosyncratic style. It's quite angular in the way that it's drawn. It's almost abstract, but it still looks really cool and cartoony and fun. So I'm sure you'll like it. Yeah, it's a good heist sort of thing. Yeah, Selena's like a hacker, spy, thief, cat burglar, all those kind of things joined in together. And Heinrich is just a disembodied head with he's mustachioed and he's got long hair, so he's presumably the ghost of someone from the 1700s or something like this, I imagine. But we don't know yet. We really don't know his history apart from Selena finding him in a research institute, imprisoned in a huge glass container. So anyway, Hacking Human, it's by Gregory Floch, or there are actually two people who do it, Robert Finch and Gregory Floch. So together they make up Gregory Floch, and it's rated M, so read it. Hacking Human. Rated M. And that was the featured comic, Hacking Human, which is it's a little bit of a Halloween theme in that there's a ghost in it. So there's a ghost in this technological world. So the featured music this week by Gum Wallace is to Kershaw Brackets, I think. Kershaw Brackets, which is a really weird name. That was a comic that Quai featured a little while ago. I had it on my feature list, but Quai got there first, and good on him for doing that. So this music, it's a warm rush of frenetic activity, modern, bright, shiny, new, fun action happening, moving, going, bouncing, bubbling, hopping, motivation. So take it away, Gum Wallace with Kershaw Brackets. That was the music. Thanks very much for that, Gum Wallace. Kershaw Brackets.
Yay.
Which is, brackets are about teeth things, braces, I suppose. So yeah, that's what Kershaw Brackets is about.
Oh yeah.
All right, so let's get into this. So Horror Comics Banes, you made a thread about this.
Yeah.
Forums.
I'll have to look for new replies there.
And various people have replied. I think I did the best replies because, of course, me.
Come on, of course. Yeah.
And let's see, Gene Joke and Bravo were sort of telling us how their comics were horror.
Right.
So we can chat a bit about that.
Different kinds of horror, definitely, the two of them, but they both do a little bit of horror.
And I was... So why don't we talk about... We'll talk about the fear itself and about the whole horror theory, but let's talk about horror comics first, and the horror comics on Drunk Dark. So the most horror comic that I ever saw on Drunk Dark, apart from Death Porn, was this comic called Ziton. Have any of you guys seen that one?
No.
Yeah, X10, like XTIN.
Yeah, X10.
Yeah,
Ziton.
yeah.
So he's got a newer version of that up now that's sort of all in color and, you know, very carefully drawn and looking really good. But his earlier version of Ziton was all in black and white, and it wasn't even black and white. It was just like line art almost. Mostly it was just outlines and stuff. But that comic is the most horror of horror comics I've ever seen. And it sickened me looking at it. It really did.
So what sickened you about it?
It was done really well. It was about just this terrible, horrible society built on like sadism, like super sadism and pain, and people having their limbs lopped off, or their bodies like their intestines ripped out, or maybe being beheaded, or their skin being flayed alive. You know, that kind of thing would be as like he created an entire society where this happens. It's just built on the idea of pain. It was just really, really well done. It was so well drawn, well realized, and it was just so heavy duty, without lots of shiny eviscera being drawn, being lovingly coloured, and in all its glory. It was just in pure black and white, and it was still had that effect. It was still very, very strongly horror. So like a Hellraiser, but turned up to 100. That was, I think that's at the top of my list, and it's deleted now from Drunk Duck. He's got his newer version up, so you'll never see the true horror of Titan. It's deleted.
Oh, this one. Are you sure about that?
Yeah, because
still
his one on with the same title is all in color, and it's different. It's totally different.
Okay, I'm seeing the black and white right now. I didn't know that. I read a little bit of the comic, but I didn't know it well enough. But I'm looking at the black and white right now. Posted in 2017.
No, this is a different one. This is a newer comic. He's done a new one in black and white.
Yes.
And he's done it in color as well, but it's not the same thing.
You're right. Yeah, I'm looking at Zeiton Rian Rain Carrion. That's the title.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's still, based on horror and, gory stuff. Like he's got people's bodies being dissolved and there's skulls being ripped out of their heads and stuff like that. So he's still really, really full on with the body horror, but it's just not as nastily evil as the first one he did. Because this one, there seems to be more of a purpose to this. Even though people's skulls are being ripped out of their heads and stuff, they're still alive in some weird kind of way. And
right.
Yeah, they're like
amazing
absorbed
art,
into this alien hole. So it's more alien than it is horror. So there seems to be a purpose. Whenever there is a purpose to something, it loses the horror a bit, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, when you can kind of make sense of it or discern it. Yeah.
Think of Lovecraft.
I don't know about that really, because in order to be able to follow a story in the first place, you do have some kind, even loose logical cause and effect thing going on, and there is always some kind of theory about why things are happening or at what point they are happening. So, like even for Halloween, where you get Michael stabbing people and everything, you do have a motive in the sense that it's the action itself that gratifies him, and he just needs to keep doing. So,
well, Go on.
No, I said that doesn't make him any less horrific. The fact that you could not justify, but explain why he's doing it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the real horror thing about, Michael Myers is the fact that, is he even human? What is he? And, why won't he die? Why is he so relentless? There's unanswered questions, which makes it more horror than just a serial killer. So a serial killer is a bit less of that kind of fear and horror than like someone who's almost supernatural, because then it just doesn't make sense in some areas, I think. Yeah,
there's definitely something to the not knowing, not having all the answers. I mean, you have some answers. There has to be some kind of coherent something going on to follow a story and be invested in it, but the nature of the horrific elements, Michael Myers is a great and kind of a great sort of simple example of that, right? Like sort of the whole point of that first movie is we don't know why did he choose those people? Why did he choose, fixate on that girl? What drives him? It's all left kind of unanswered.
Yeah, think about one of the classics is H.P. Lovecraft and his Cthulhu horror. So that is kind of scary and otherworldly, and oh my god, we're gonna go mad even thinking about it, looking at it. But in his later stories, it comes on that, these creatures are the aliens and some kind of, like from outer space and stuff like that. And then it loses some of the unknowability. And...
For me too, yeah. When you start explaining stuff, it definitely loses a little.
I think that sort of explanation, the way that you are describing it, is that he is undermining the premise that he has set up, like this is a god of some sort, like a deity or a spirit or something supernatural. But the justification of aliens puts it within the spectrum of humanity, in a sense, even if you have different species. So that's why it diminishes the horror of it. But I don't know if that would be the case if the justification was something like it's this primordial chaos god or something that just wants to create chaos or whatever. So you would have an explanation, but this explanation wouldn't be geared to demystify things. So that, and in that way, take away the horror. So I think it depends how you are explaining it.
Yeah, absolutely. And back to the whole thing between cause and effect, it is good, as you were saying, to have some basic cause and effect at work. Because when things are too random, you don't become afraid of it anymore. Because now there's over 7 billion people on the planet. When things are too random, you're reasonably sure that you'll look out or you'll be fine or you'll be safe. And there's also really no build-up to anything horror-wise. There's no reason for us to suspect that any one person will be hit with something. So therefore, suspense doesn't build up. Whereas when you do have something, a basic cause and effect, such as, you go swim in Camp Crystal Lake and have sex and, then this guy's going to come out and kill you. That's a basic cause and effect that you can say, condition A was met, therefore we can expect condition B. And that's where fear starts to build, because you start to expect that somebody's going to get killed or something horrible is going to happen. And that's a really important part of horror.
But you
have to build exactly. And so that's the big difference. But it's important in horror to have a reason to expect that something will happen. I've watched and read some things in the past that a lot of things do this, where they'll expect you to be afraid of, the bad thing that's coming, whereas the other characters, for whatever reason, for too long, they don't expect it. Or for too long, there's no suspense built up. It's just kind of disjointed. And that doesn't work as well as when you start to watch characters starting to suspect things and fear for themselves. Because once a character starts to become afraid of something, you become afraid of something quite often. So it's important to have that, to have some empathy, but also some degree of cause and effect. If A is met, then B is sure to follow.
And also, if the characters are built in such a way that you expect them to be the fodder, so that you can see how the killer kills, or how the thing that is the big bad, whatever it is, how it brings about mayhem on them. Then again, you are not very scared, because you don't connect with those characters, and not only you don't care what happens to them, but you often expect it, and sometimes you say, like, get on with it. Let me see what the hell is going to happen, or whatever.
Exactly.
So in order to get horror, the one last thing, in order to get horror, I would say that you need to at least care for them enough to be invested in them as a character. For them to be unique,
you don't want them to die. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, there's a comic on Drunk Duck called what's it called? Slaughter at Camp, Not a Movie. So this is a comic that I featured a while ago, and it plays on the whole, like what was the
Jason
It's a slasher. It's a love letter to it's like Friday the 13th.
Exactly. So it's like, people at Crystal Lake, they're at a camp and they're all back, nubile people like, young and 20-year-olds and all that kind of thing at this camp, and they're being killed off one by one. But you fall in love with the characters as the comic starts, and you develop a relationship, and the deaths don't start happening until, quite a few pages in, like maybe 15 or 20 pages in. So you totally don't expect it. You've become, loving the characters, and there's comedy and stuff, and then suddenly there's this brutal murder, and it's just changes the tone completely. Yeah. So that was really, really good, the way that did it. And that does everything you guys are talking about. So, you have the people having sex and all that kind of thing, and, stuff, and you're thinking, oh God, I don't want these people to go out alone now, and that happens. So a Slaughter at Camp, Not a Movie. I highly recommend that one.
Yeah.
I was liking that one. Actually, I haven't seen recently. It's been so busy. I haven't seen the newest updates. There's probably lots to read. I have to get back to that one, man. Yeah.
Exactly. It's worth getting into. I haven't looked at it either. Because
there is this.
Go on.
It is that you might run in horror, that it might spill over to humor in a way that you don't intend, and that again will dispel the horror, because if something that you intend to horrify people actually makes them laugh, instead of providing some kind of comic relief for your audience that you intend, it will destroy the horror, the horrific atmosphere. And I have had this happen to me with some very gory deaths in certain films. I don't remember which ones though, which is Telltale. Where it's supposed to be like, oh my God, this killer got the woman, but the woman dies in such a hilarious, cartoonish way that you feel bad that you are laughing at the whole predicament, but you are. It's like, being tossed out of a window as she screams in a very cartoonish, you can't take it seriously after that. It's like, don't do that.
That's a good point. It's okay to have humor in a horror thing as long as you it's only in the parts where you intend, and it's not on the deaths. So you got to keep them horrific. I think there's a lot of horror comics that do the mix well, like Slaughter at Camp, Not a Movie. I thought that did it well. What's his name? El Cid's Death Porn. That was one that it's definitely not to my taste, but that has a mix of horror and humor in it. I can't really talk much because I haven't really read it enough to say, but I think that the humor doesn't take away from the horror in that one. What about you guys? Are there any particular horror comics? I know Bravo thinks he was describing, Interstellar Blood Beasts. That was, I suppose, a bit of a schlocky kind of horror. I think that was more humor than straight out horror, though.
I haven't read it, or at least I don't remember it. The one I do remember that touches, does have horror is Full Moon Stories. I remember, it's like a
yes, I remember that.
And it was done in a very artistic way, and the panels were very creatively done. like not to the grid that you would expect. And generally, everything is very uneasy. The atmosphere, it's super atmospheric. And it feels like you are reading something from Edgar Allan Poe or Maupassant or someone in that category, let's say. So very, very well done.
Yeah, definitely that sort of slightly off kilter in the way it's told. Yeah, some of the comics that Scream did also had a bit of that to them. That's just the way he was, telling them. Like he had this this comic. It was all black and white. I can't even remember what it's called because he bloody deletes all this stuff. He only shows it for a while, then he deletes it. But he had this comic that just seemed like it was going to be a horror comic, but it never really went into that territory, even though the people look so bizarre and horrific and awful in the situations seemed to be that as well. He never sort of took us down that track, which was a really weird way of telling it. But his work always has not now, I suppose, because his work is very like bubbly and almost animated looking, but it used to be very slightly off kilter, and you always had that feeling that something horrific is going to happen very soon. So that was definitely his style of telling. I was trying to think of more horror comics. Do you guys remember there was a great one in I think it was in Heavy Metal or 2000 AD, and it was the basis of a movie. That you see the cover of the movie, and it's like this robot skull painted with the American flag. But the comic itself was about this this assassinating, like this robot who's gone insane and it's killing people. And this man tries to fight it or whatever, and he thinks he's destroyed it, and he comes home to his wife, and he sees her sitting there with his back to him, and then she turns around, and it's not his wife at all, it's the robot wearing her skin or something like this, and it was just...
Oh my god.
Yeah. It's a really, really horrific reveal, but there was this movie, I think it's called like Malfunction, and they took the story of the comic and they made a movie out of it, and then they had to they got sued or something for stealing the idea of the movie, from the comic. And that was really interesting. But the movie was I've never seen the movie, but anyway, it has this, if you ever see the cover of it, is really unique because it's got this robot skull face with painted with the American flag, and it looks so cool.
There is a lot of horror manga out there, and I'm trying to remember now this very famous Japanese creator that's
Junji Ito. I think we've talked about him before. Yeah.
So that's the one. Very, very horrific stuff.
Oh man, that's definitely those are some of the scariest comics I've read, or some of his stories. Yeah, very Lovecraftian, sort of overwhelming, kind of no escape, kind of.
Yeah, a lot of body horror too.
Yeah.
There's one that kind of reminds me of that in style a little bit that I've just begun reading. So I haven't gotten very far with it, so maybe it'll end up being something else. But it's called Parasite, and it has kind of like a storyline, kind of like The Thing, where these aliens or something arrive and kind of possess people's bodies, and they can turn them into all sorts of things. And it's about this boy, and he gets one of these parasites, and it's kind of like from his perspective, I think, is like his hands start changing into things and like talking to him and stuff, and like all sorts of weird shit like that. So it's like loss of control of your own body is a terrifying concept, because that's the one thing in this world that is designated to you, that is your realm. You know what I mean? And like the idea of your own body becoming something alien is terrifying, and it's the basis of a lot of horror that's out there because it works so well.
Oh my God, for sure. I mean, you have the alien, obviously, from the chest. There's that Stephen King, that Creepshow short from the original Creepshow movie we've talked about before.
Yeah.
Where, Stephen King plays that hick, and he starts, gets infected with something and starts turning into a plant.
Yeah,
That's pretty, as goofy as his character is, it's really, kind of sad, terrifying.
Yeah, and on that premise that you mentioned, and that is very true, because in something that is definitely not horror, like the cartoon, The Last Airbender, there is this sequence, like a couple of episodes, where one of the characters, Katara, who is the waterbender, the one who can control water in every way, she learns to blood bend. So that means that to use the water that is in the blood stream of other people to control their bodies, basically. So, and it's the sequences. If you ever want, type it out in YouTube and see the clips, it's very horrific, because you get people that go into all these very angular and spasmodic, contorted, almost like possessed, like in The Exorcist positions, because she is controlling them. And there is the whole image becomes horrific without the actual cartoon being horror or ever actually intending to be horror in the long run. So, losing control of your body is the epitome of horror. It works very well.
Yeah. Definitely. And, sorry, a correction, the movie's not called Malfunction, it's called Hardware.
Hardware, okay.
Hardware. I think I've heard of it, yeah.
That's it.
It's a little better of a title. Malfunction is a terrible title.
Oh, jeez. Well, it has an excellent cover anyway. Excellent image.
Yeah.
So you guys...
Losing your mind, connected to the body thing, the mind thing, that probably scares me a little more. It's sort of the idea that what you're seeing is not real, losing your grip.
Yeah.
That's a terrifying thought,
Oh, very much so.
Just as much not in our control and stuff.
Okay, so more primal fears are things like things in the dark that you can't see. Are there any comics that really do that, or any media properties?
Yes, actually. I was just thinking, the comic that just won Best Manga, I think it was Best Horror, Best Manga. I don't know. I think it was manga on the dock. It's The Gloom, and the comic overall, it's got some potential. There are some places where it seems like it kind of loses where it's trying to go, unless it all comes together later on. But there is one scene that I really liked how they handled, especially in comic form, because they did a phenomenal job. Whoever did this, I forgot the person's name. I'm really sorry if you're listening to this.
I think Armand Avat, or I don't know how to pronounce it, but Armand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it's this scene where the main character, she's kind of in her kitchen, in her house, her apartment, and she begins to hear this knocking at the door. And she goes to answer the door, and it's kind of that cliche, there's nobody there. But then she closes the door, and it starts up again. And again, there's nobody there. And the way they present it, like I said, it's cliche. We've seen that a million times before. But the way it's done in this comic is so good, because, as you're reading, your skin starts to crawl. And it's just something about the way the angles are used, and they must really know how to present suspense and tension in these comics. It's because that's really important to do in a comic, especially if you have a horror comic, to know how to convey those kind of things. You can't just like make panel like, here's a person head on and this is the, blah, blah, blah. You really have to think of how to make things intimidating or scary and shit like that, or, off kilter. Mm. And they do a fantastic job in that scene. So check that out, if at least only for the scene. I mean, give the comic itself a read too. It's not bad. But phenomenal. So,
that's a good example, because it's very hard to render a lot of those horror aspects in a comic and translate that over. Have any of you guys read Demon Eater by Jilly Fu?
Some of it.
No, yeah. I always intend to, and then I don't, for some reason.
This is a very popular comic on Drunk Dog. Demon Eater.
Yeah, one of our top 10s, at least some of the time. Way
yeah,
up there.
At the moment. I've read a bit of it, and yeah, it's so this demon lives in the demon realm and starts off being very weak and has to get stronger by eating other demons. So as it it eats and eats, and then suddenly it crosses over into the real world somehow. It's I haven't read it for a long time, but that's a
me either. But I remember its intro really did stick with me for the art style and stuff, and he just did a great job of portraying this kind of primal, hateful world it's just full of wolves, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like everything is trying to eat each other. There is no compassion. There's no empathy. And that's the part that I really remember from it. So that's done really well. And that's another kind of primal fear, isn't it? It's just like being alone in the world, having to let your evil instincts take over in order to survive. Because if you become soft in any way, you will die. That's terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
Exactly. Absolutely. So that's another interesting take. I'm just gonna add another comic to the list. Okay, Chubby the Vampire. So we have very, very humorous, very cutesy horror, but it does go into the realms of dark horror sometimes, on occasion. But interestingly, she uses that that whole horror thing as a background to these very cute characters with a very Animaniac kind of feel to the world that they're in. So it's a really interesting take on it, totally going in a completely other direction. Sometimes, characters who seem like very friendly, very, very cutesy will turn into something more horrific. Huge fangs will sprout from their faces, and there's large cute eyes will turn into almost bug-eyed monster kind of things, and there'll be like she has this creature that's like a giant stuffed teddy bear almost that runs around in the forest, and that can be quite horrific at times. Most of the time it looks like a cute, lovely thing, but it has these tentacles from its face, and it wraps it around prey and gobbles them down. And her world is like very friendly and nice to other monsters, like vampires and little demons and elves and stuff like that. But as soon as there's a nice, normal human in the forest of Kellerwood, I think it is called, it's open season, and they just gobble them down, and they're never heard from again. So there's quite a contrast in that world.
Yeah.
There's
one called The Weird Adventures of Armless Amy that he updates Amalok, I think is the creator, Amalok H1. But the update, like they update so much that I sort of was not able to keep up with it. But I was reading it like pretty avidly for a while there, and it's intriguing, very simple kind of art style, very intriguing world, sort of a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and the main character is this little girl with no arms and her traveling around with her, like walking across this tundra, this like dry desert tundra with her cat, and she comes upon these houses and bunkers with these freaky kind of characters. They're usually wearing masks, one guy's dressed up like Oz. He's got a top hat and a cloak on. And you can see these sort of little bits, like when other of these characters are wearing masks, like sort of porcelain doll masks, but you can see like little bits of their skin. They're sort of,
how
diseased, or just the muscle, skinless skin underneath. Just it's so much what you don't see, and the way they talk is kind of formal. Most of these characters, but they also talk about wanting to have a friend, wanting to have a, like, would you like to see my collection of dolls? It's like stuff like that. But there are these like there's horrible stuff going on, and it's pretty. It's worth a look. It's quite unique.
What about speaking of weird stuff that's horrific? Have you guys seen? I think it's called Cochlea and Eustacia.
Oh yeah. Awesome.
I'm not sure if that's the name of it.
By Hans Reichhardt, I think, is the creator.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a link to the damn
thing. Is that
right?
Yeah. I bought one of his printed editions, actually. His art is so awesome.
What's it called?
It's such a Cochlea and Eustacia, or something like that. Cochlea, and Eustacia is Eustacia, I think.
Oh, damn it. So, yeah, that, like you say, that's, you've had a look at the printed version. But that comic is, I don't know if anything directly horror happens in it. I've read quite a bit of it, but it is so weird and, just so the world is askew, the world is tilted, and it's just so weird and so bizarre that you do get the horror feeling of it anyway, because it's just so strange. So it features these two female characters. They will always run around with no pants on, which I quite like. Yeah. But
they have like on and like little short
short little baby doll dresses. But the whole thing is they live in this bizarre world with these, gigantic creatures and monsters that are just an ear with legs or something like that. And it's just so bizarre and so weird. And you're always getting a feeling of horror because it is so bizarre. Like there are certain movies that you'll see that are just, straight out horror, like there's a monster who's going to chop your head off or whatever. See, there's that kind of thing. But then there are other movies that you'll watch that everything is so weird, like Eraserhead or something like that. It's not made as a straight out horror, but you feel even more scared or even more weird in your brain after watching them, because the world that they're showing you is just like nothing makes sense. This is just so twisting my version of reality, and that can give you even more of a feeling of horror than a straight out, here's the intestines and here's your blood and that. That's what I find anyway. What's your guys' opinion on that kind of thing?
There's something to having the thing where everything seems off, like everything's just a little bit off or very off. You're in a different kind of reality almost. That's like very unsettling.
If you've ever seen the classic surrealist movie, what was it called? Like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and all that kind of stuff. So you watch that kind of thing and it's just so weird, you see like a woman's, I don't know if it's in the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, but there's one of these surrealist movies where you see a woman's eye being sliced in half with a razor.
It wasn't in that one. I think that was an old French short. I think it was French. I always think that old arty films are French now. But I forgot what that was, but I think it was a short of some kind, I thought. But something about the moon, I think, was in the title anyway. But yeah, that's a weird one. But
yeah, with that
I think the Uncanny Valley can be very frightening but it can also very easy, like what you described, sounds more like a gore thing than actual horror, unless it was presented in a different manner. Like I'm thinking there is this film, I'm not sure of the title. I think it's The Room or something like that. And I'm not talking about the or it could be The Cube, maybe The Cube, something like that, where
with Salma Hayek or whatever her name was, one of those old.
she's supposed the main character is supposed to be this psychologist or neurologist that gets into this machine and tries to go into the subconscious of a serial killer, and that's basically an excuse for all sorts of very horrific or shocking imagery. That it has some kind of impact at first, but then either it becomes very trite and tiring or ridiculous. Like I remember this scene where there is this horse in a room and razor sharp mirrors come down and slice the horse up in sections, but and then the horse parses like a how is it called, like a, oh my god, what's this instrument that you pull apart?
Accordion?
Taffy?
Yes, like an accordion. It spreads out, and you see all the slices of horse that are somehow still working, and this is very disturbing, I suppose, but it's also very stupid. And you might, at least I found myself confused in the sense, like, should I be disgusted or should I laugh at this as a failed attempt to shock me? So yeah, it can be, the uncanny valley can be very, very creepy, scary and stuff, but then when you get super bizarre things like this, I don't know if you can still call yourself, horrified. That's what I'm saying.
It can depend if like everything, it has to be done well enough to really get you there, doesn't it? You can't just throw a bunch of crap on the wall and hopefully it'll stick and hopefully it'll all work out. It has to be done well. Like a horror movie can't be a horror movie unless it works. And it's the same with those ones that are like make your world weird and distort your sense of reality. They don't do that unless they actually work. So they have to be done well enough.
Yeah, it's all kind of proofs in the pudding. It's like comedy, if it makes you laugh, it's funny, and if it makes you scared, it's scary, kind of thing. It's kind of how you react to it. When I think of like being off-putting, like I think of subtler things, like in the original Shining movie, or something where it's just the way it's shot, the way the angles are. Even if nothing's happening, it's like if you're watching that movie alone in your house and everything's quiet and you really pay attention, it's incredibly unsettling. Yeah. And then when something does happen, it's very scary just because you're already kind of off kilter.
Very much so. And I was watching something about that, and the devil was really in the details of the movie in that movie, because everything from the carpet that was chosen in the hallways and lighting and everything like that, those are all factors, like real subtle factors that go into telling your brain that this is someplace that's just a little not right, because you already are cued into that, knowing that you're going into a horror movie. And with that said, all you really have to do is paint your scene with, rough shapes, like sharp-edged shapes are good at alerting the brain that a scene is harsh or sharp, or I'm not saying that quite right, but you know what I mean? Like simple basic things, and like the colors of a scene, it all goes into like danger responses and stuff like that. So, and they were very aware of that when building the set for that movie, or not building it, but dressing it up and stuff like that. Yeah. So, and that's why, so much of that movie, and a lot of that movie, nothing is necessarily going on, but the whole thing has you on the edge of your seat because they know how to manipulate those scenes between the times where the abrupt scares, the very real scares are going on. And that's another really important thing. You're going to have some downtime in your horror. And when you do that, you need to know how to fill it properly. And that's quite a balancing act, because when you try too hard and try to fill all of the scenes in between with jump scares and stuff like that, like remember to be scared, that gets really old after a while, and people get tired before the end of it. They're just like done. Whereas if you go the other way and you forget to alert people there's something going on in the background, they stop caring then too. You know what I mean? So it's an important balancing act.
Yeah. And there's a show, since I just watched it all. Sorry, Tansy, go ahead.
No, go on.
I'll just quickly say this show, The Haunting of Hill House, it's new on Netflix. The whole thing already?
Yeah.
Awesome. What did you think?
I liked it. I thought they did a great job with a lot of things.
Oh, man. I loved it. I just finished it last night, and I thought it was amazing. And it was very much along the lines of The Shining in a way. Like, I mean, you're kind of...
It is.
The characters are so believable. They're so well written. And a lot of the real horror of it comes from just real life.
Yeah. Like you imagine yourself. Yeah.
So then when those few things happen... it's just...
Hello?
Hello?
Changes, like you see a statue, like that's...
What's that?
That's breaking up a lot.
Oh, I can't hear him at all.
Baines,
come back.
He's been
Get
gotten.
the Ouija board.
Oh my god, the monster's gotten Baines. Shit! Quick, guys.
He's in the underneath, or whatever they call it, from the
Stop going off in the bushes and having sex.
Or there's that. Oh, that's fine too.
Baines, come back to us. Oh, jeez.
Because we started dorking out way too much. Like he and I, when we get going on about this stuff, the internet's like, just stop.
Yeah, the internet. Jeez. Bug you guys. Well, speaking of The Shining, have you seen that film by Spielberg? What is it? Ready Player One.
No.
Well, they have this scene in it from The Shining, and it's really well done. It's the scene from The Shining where there's this woman having a bath.
Yeah.
And she turns into like a murderous monster.
Like the old hag, kind of. She's like kissing Jack, and then also she's like...
Exactly, and that's replicated. Even though this is like an action adventure, comedy adventure almost. Well, not really a comedy. It's an action adventure, and it's really fun and light. When you get into that scene, it really retains the horror. It's done so well, and it really is genuinely frightening. So that's the interesting thing, that you still managed to retain the horror and the frighteningness of the original movie in this thing, which is, like obviously remade like 40 years later. It's really notable for that. and that retains the scariness. But some of the other scenes they've sort of it's not a direct thing from The Shining at all, but they've got like these ghosts dancing in the ballroom. So they're in the world of The Shining. And even though, they've got ghostly bodies and like almost zombies, like skeletal, and their heads are almost falling off and they're gargling the black blood or whatever, they're not scary at all. That's sort of, that's done for comedy. So it's not being bodies and it's not gargling blood and it's not being ghostly that makes something scary. It's other things.
Presentation, I think.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to make the feel. You've got to make it deliberately scary. You can't just hand someone a skeleton and expect that to work.
I mean, we've all got one with us technically, so.
Well, sure, yeah.
No, I'm a bit of a boneless slug. That's my thing.
A boneless slut?
Slug.
Oh.
Don't take that away from me, man.
I think that some things may not translate as well to film from short stories. Like I was thinking, the story Hitchcock's story, The Birds, which is I had the privilege or misfortune, because I had a different idea about what I didn't go into it thinking that. Sorry, guys, I'll be cut off most likely. 1 second.
Okay.
Hello.
The Birds is an interesting horror tale, isn't it? Because it doesn't start off as being very horrific at all. When you're looking at it, it's very artsy and very, early 60s, late 50s, I think. It's very sleek and everybody looks really, really good and they're dressed in like the top fashions of the day. It's very correct. It's almost like, some like a drama, it's a sophisticated drama almost. But the horror slowly ramps up and you realize that this world is like just totally off and weird and off kilter, because people are like, you have this sense of menace from the birds, and then suddenly you can't even go outside your door because these damn things are just going to go out and peck you to death, and the world just slowly collapses inevitably, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. It becomes a survival horror in the end.
Yeah.
And the world collapses very slowly into it. So it's a weird film, and it has the worst ending of any film ever.
I don't even remember how that movie ends. It's been so long.
The ending is such that you want to ring up and complain to the TV station or, whoever's showing it and think, where's the end of my thing? Where did it go? You forgot to put the ending on. Because that's it. So, like, spoilers for anyone who's not seen a movie that's bloody 60 years old. But, okay, so these people
there
are
kids out there.
These people are isolated in their house. They can't even get outside because there's these birds, and they'll kill them if they even step 1 foot outside the door. They have to barricade all the windows up, all the doors, everything like that, so these birds can't get in and kill them. And so they hatch a plan that they're going to drive to the city or an army base or something like that, and then they're going to they're going to foil these birds. They're going to get to civilization. They're going to get away from this. All they need to do is get in the car and go. And the film basically finishes when they get to the car, and you don't even know if they managed to drive down the road almost. So that's when it ends. You don't see them going towards this thing that they've been planning for the last half an hour. That doesn't happen. Anyway.
Are you talking about the birds? Well, I was going to say that the actual short story is extremely horrific, suspenseful. It makes you feel afraid. Like you do glare at birds for a while afterwards. So there is that. But the movie can't really, at least the movie, the way I remember it when I saw it, it doesn't show this. It comes across a little silly because somehow the way the birds are framed or shown in general, they don't come off as intimidating as it happens in the short story. The atmosphere is less stifling than what is described in the short story. Like the way they board up the house. In the short story, the whole process of boarding up every room on a clock, because the birds attack every night, like after sundown, is extremely suspenseful and stress-inducing. Especially because you see the birds coming nearer and nearer because they are expecting, like, okay, it's almost happy hour in a second. And the guys are trying to board up the house, but they don't manage to do it all. So half the house is invaded basically by these birds. And that's a very creepy and horrid situation. Because it also describes the sounds of the birds just crashing against the boarding and everything, and some, get their necks broken and they die, and you get all this imagery, auditory and visual imagery that really sells the premise. Whereas this doesn't happen in the movie, especially. I think maybe it needs to be remade. I don't know. But as it was, it didn't come across as very horrific, like suspense. This suspense that makes you afraid, in a sense.
I think it did somewhat, but yeah, probably not as much as in the book. And I think what Hitchcock did was focus more on the drama between the people more than the situation, because that's his thing. And you have that, I think the mother-in-law, or no, it's not a mother-in-law. I think the mother of this woman was there, and there was all this family drama between these people and recriminations and things, and that's what was a part of the focus, rather than just the horror of the birds.
Yeah, that's kind of how Night of the Living Dead was as well. Because I noticed there's kind of primarily two responses to Night of the Living. It's either, let's get to some zombie attacks already, and okay, there's some suspense in the household, but I'm not into this. Can we move on? And then there are other people who get really worked up seeing that kind of suspense, because you're, in fact, you can tell which side of the fence I land on after this, but you can tell, there's danger outside of the household. You have The Walking Dead, which is uncanny, especially back then when you hadn't seen it 20 million times already. That was extremely uncanny. And then inside of the house, you're not safe either, because mistrust and all sorts of different tensions make it not safe in there, and threaten to kind of break things down from the inside. And so you think you're somewhere safe, but you truly really aren't. And you still have to get out to find somewhere safe. And you have to face those things, or you have to find other kind of ground, which exposes you again to danger. So I find that really scary. And I also think in general too, I mean, I guess it goes without saying, but like, not everybody is into horror for whatever reasons, just like I'm not into all sorts of other things. But I think to really be into horror, one of the things you need, like to be into horror in the sense that you enjoy being immersed in the horror, I think you need a certain amount of empathy. to be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Otherwise, you will never feel like you're a part of what's going on, and you'll never have a reason to be afraid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to identify with the characters who are in the horrible situation. Whereas if you just find them funny or you despise them, then you'll want them to die. And
well, it doesn't just fall on the characters either. It falls on the immersion of the world at hand. Like, we have kind of a habit of falling on, oh, I didn't like these characters in this horror movie, therefore I didn't like it. We have a habit of kind of falling on that, and I think that kind of shortchanges things. There's an entire atmosphere. Especially if it's a good horror movie, everything in that movie should be part of the atmosphere and the immersion, no matter what you think of the characters.
I mean, your point on empathy, though, you can create a world where the horror becomes lessened because you don't really care what's going to happen to the people. So you don't feel empathy for them or empathy for the situation. So if you don't, then it's not as horrific. Say something like Critters, if you ever seen that.
No,
yeah.
But
way back.
Yeah, so it's a horror comedy, but it's not even horror because you don't really like anyone or feel sympathy or whatever.
Yeah.
So it just becomes more
so
comedy.
characters are important to a degree, but I think like what my point was with empathy was, I think sometimes people go into a horror movie with, I don't want to say the wrong mentality because there's no wrong mentality, but if you want to really enjoy a movie like this from the perspective that you want to become afraid, you need to go into the movie willing to become vulnerable to a point. Because I think sometimes, a lot of times people come out of horror movies as a bragging right. Like, oh, I went in and I saw this and I didn't even get scared. And granted, that's more of like the juvenile response. Like, okay, all right, thanks, kid. But people just kind of misunderstand horror a lot of times as a notch to put in your belt, or, to say that, oh, I'm not afraid. And that's not really what horror is for. Horror is for immersion and to experience something usually extreme that you wouldn't, or hopefully wouldn't, in your normal life, a reaction of some kind, So I don't know, if you're not open to that, then
yeah.
Well said.
On that point, there's a story by Ambrose Bierce. So he's the fellow who's famous for the Devil's Dictionary, which is this very satirical book about definitions. But he writes this short story where these two characters are talking. They meet on a train or something like that, and they're having a chat. And this one says, I'm not really scared by horror stories or ghost stories. I'm never scared. It's just, they just don't scare me. It doesn't mean anything to me. And the other one says, well, yeah, you have to really feel it in order to, you have to give yourself up to it. Have to put yourself in the right frame of mind and the right environment. And then believe me, if you read this story that I've got, you'll be scared to death and it will work. And the other one says, okay, yeah, sure, I'll take you up on that deal. So I think, he sets these conditions for him to read this horror story by. Like, he has to be in this, large, horrible, abandoned house, all alone, and he is only allowed to read the story after midnight by candlelight. And in this, being all alone in this abandoned house, and he does it, and he follows the conditions, and the next day he's discovered dead because he was scared to death.
Oh man.
To your point that you were making early too, I didn't mean to sound like I was totally discrediting it. I have a bad habit of kind of going too far the other way. But you're right though, in that there also does need to be an amount of characterization, and in order for something to be scary, it can't just be on the audience's end either to accept it. It has to the movie has to immerse itself in its sense and what's it's not just the movie, but the comic, anything has to be willing to immerse itself in what it's doing, to really think about its subject and what it can do with it, whether it's whether it's more on the silly spectrum of horror or whether it's, more on the other end, the uncanny end or whatever. You always have to immerse yourself as a creator in what you're doing. Just when you just have in mind a couple cheap scares that you want to pull off, and that's really all that you're doing. Yeah. And jump scares, the thing with them is they're fine if they're done right. But the thing is, it's become so trendy, as you'll hear a lot of the times, they've become so very trendy in that there'll be a manufactured noise that's made with the jump scare, and then it won't be connected at all to what's going on. It'll be like a fake out. And that's...
Oh, fake out.
Yeah. Whereas Hereditary had a really good hold on the couple jump scares that it did have. They just happen because they're... And to what you were talking about earlier too, the new Haunting series also had some really good jump scares because they were...
I was going to ask you about one in particular, made me literally shout.
The car?
Jump back and shout, yes, the car.
That was... I love that. That was fantastically done. Oh, that was fantastic. I had to pause it for a second. Jesus.
Oh, God, me too, yeah. At that moment, you're so invested in the human drama. There's some intense stuff going on at that moment, right? That has nothing to do with ghosts or whatever. So it was like a perfect moment to just, oh my God.
Absolutely. And maybe it's made all the more powerful, because I won't really say anything about it, but because of who it is in the jump scare, because you still have that association, that family drama, but all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's just so good. It's so damn good.
Very good. Very
But yeah.
It's also,
even for not a super horror fan, I would recommend that show.
Yeah, it's a good story. Good. It's good, man.
Also, your brother Baines did his horror movie with the demon creatures. I can't spoil it by saying what's in there, but it's not what you expect, the story. So
right, it's got a little genre shift in there.
We've linked to that in the news post before, so people, someone's sort of seen it.
Yeah.
So that is really cleverly done. Well, we shouldn't talk too much because we're past an hour. We're at like an hour and 16 minutes, so we should wrap it up.
Yeah, man.
All right. Scary. We're all ghosts, of course. Well, thank you guys for listening to the Horrorcast on close to Halloween, roundabouts.
Yes, next time will be our Halloween cast. We'll have to figure out what to do for that.
Oh,
well, we still
I'm right?
I don't know, when is Halloween?
31st.
Oh, really? Oh, shit. Okay.
We'll think of something else. It's a huge subject. So
yeah.
We'll have to get those damn teeth to stick. Okay.
That's right.
This has been the Horrorcast. All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.